Welcome to Working with Granite Part 2. On this video I'm going to cover getting a good profile on here. Now this is a half bull nose and this is a full bull nose. This hooks up to your wet grinder. It has little holes in here just like some of the other ones and that work with wet grinders, and the water comes out here that keeps it cool. This will give me a bull nose on the top edge only. This one will give me a full bull nose. If you put this up against here, it's going to go all the way up to the end of this, and this little bearing right here that's going to ride against the edge. So you have to make sure the center of that edge is perfectly flat, because that bearing is going to follow everything. On this one, you have to make sure the bottom's perfectly flat, because it's going to run along the bottom edge. You really want to have the whole thing flat, but if you have a tiny little divot in the middle, it's not going to be a problem, or on the top part of this one, it's not going to be a problem because it's just going to grind it right off. This is what you have to worry about. Okay, these are replaceable. You just take this nut loose and you can slide this off, and you have the whole bearing and housing. You can just change this bit. Same with this one. You can change the profiles with this bit right here. Take a good look at this edge right here. This is what I'm talking about. If this is on an angle either way, you're going to have a bad edge. Now it's not so bad when you're just polishing, because you can use a 50 grit sanding disc and you can get this straight. But if you're going to go with a profile like this, it's going to ride along this edge. And if it rides along this edge, it's going to go right into that bearing. And once this bearing hits, this bearing is going to ride all along this edge of the workpiece. And like I said, if you have divots or anything in there, it's going to follow it. Before we start polishing, I want to show you how it's done. There's a certain method that you have to use in order to get a good polish, and it's really simple. You just have to make sure to follow these steps. This is a backer pad. This backer pad screws onto your grinder, and it has Velcro on this side. So you can take your disc, your pads, and you just stick them right on there. Okay, they're quick connect, so you can go from one step to the other real quickly. Alright, first I want to show you this one. This is a 50 grit. The 50 grit is made to take off the heavy scratches. Okay, that is your first step when you start polishing. After you grind the edges, you're going to have deep scratches. This will take them off. When you're using this disc, make sure you don't over polish it with it. And what I mean by that is, don't just keep going over and over and over, because you'll burn the disc and it doesn't work as well. On top of that, you want to make sure if you're hitting these edges, don't go right onto a sharp edge like this and just hit it, because you can knock these teeth off. You want to just start polishing and kind of work your way onto that. Alright, after you get your 50 grit sanded down and you know all these deep scratches are off, you'll see little brush looking scratches. That's when you step up to a 100 grit pad. You go from 100 and you like to double to 2 and then 4 and on and so on. But some manufacturers jump up in different ways, and I've ordered pads and found out that they didn't jump up that way. So I have tons of pads. I'm just going to show you for instance how this works. I have a 50. I would normally go to 100, which this is. Then I would go to 200, but this one's 150. It's okay to go 50% higher or 100% higher. Don't go more than 100%. And what I'm saying by that is, don't go from 100 to 300. Okay? Make sure you go from 1 to 2. If you don't have a 2, go to 150. After that, you can go to 300, and then you can go 500 or 600. That's okay. And this one would go 1,000. As long as you double and don't go past double, you're going to get a good shine. If you pass that double mark, you're not going to get a good shine. Okay, these will go all the way up to 3,000, and at 3,000 you should get a really good shiny surface. It should match your top. If you don't, you can go to buff, but before I would go to buff, I would go ahead and backtrack, because if you don't get a good shine from 3,000, something's wrong. You probably made a mistake down the line, or you have an extremely high polished granite top if it doesn't match. But if you don't get a really good shine, backtrack. The safe way to backtrack is go all the way back to 100. You know you knocked 50. I don't think, if you miss 50, you'll see deep scratches in it. If you don't see deep scratches, go to 100 and then step up from there. It won't take you nearly as long because most of those are already polished out. You just missed a step. So you go back to 100 and then come back all the way up to 3,000 and you should have a really nice polish. 99% of the time you'll be satisfied with 3,000. If you really want to get a higher gloss though, go ahead and use the buff. Alright, for this particular piece of granite I'm going to go ahead and use the roundover bit, or some people will call it the half bullnose. Once I make this cut on here, I'm going to come back over and start polishing. Now I'm ready to polish. This is my 50 grit. Make sure you don't have this cranked up. Keep it at 2. If you crank it up more than 2, 3 or 4 or 5, this disc is going to go flying off. It's only held on by Velcro, and believe me, I almost put my eye out one time. Luckily I had goggles on. I had it cranked up to 5 by accident because I was grinding and I was in a hurry, got careless. I put this disc on, I went to go polish. That disc went flying off, hit my goggles, cracked them, and went sailing through the air, landed on somebody's roof, I don't know. But just make sure you don't crank these RPMs up. Keep it at 2. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to get the first scratches out, and then we're just going to go from there. Before we go any further, I want to make sure you understand how this works. This is a 50 grit, and I polish this out. Okay, you're going to have tiny scratches in here. Don't worry about that. If you come back over with 100 after that and you still see those scratches, then you backtrack, hit it with a 50, and then come back over. That way you know you got it taken care of. Don't sit here and try to get every little scratch out, because you're going to have scratches in there from the 50. And a lot of times if people are beginners, I'd get them to hold the grinder one way and let it spin this way for 50. And then turn it the opposite way for 100. So that way if you see scratches that go the opposite way as what you're doing, then you'll know you missed them and you can go back. Once you get a feel for it and an eye for it, you can just stay the same way, and you can look at it and tell. I can tell this is right here is ready to move forward. You can see little scratches right here where this is kind of shiny and this isn't. If you see dull spots where it's kind of not shiny but you see it darker, and then you see light spots, that little light spot's a missed spot. Go ahead and hit it. It just takes a real quick swipe. I got tiny little lines right here. I'm going to hit those. Once we get that done, we're going to come back over with the 100 and then we'll go further. Also with the 50, you'll have a little ridge right here from that bit. That's where the bearing rides on it and then goes over for the roundover. You're going to just knock that off with 50. You'll come back and you just kind of round it over. I'm going to show you in this little section how to do that. A good tip would be to get a damp rag and just wipe across it. And this is why I'm telling you this. If you're not used to doing it, you can go ahead and wipe it, and then wherever you hit it with this sander, it's gonna dry out real fast. That way you know you covered the whole thing. If you see a wet mark on there, then you missed a spot. And I'll show you what I'm talking about right now. I wet it, I hit it, and I just come down until everything's dry. When the whole thing is dry, I know I sanded that whole point, so then I can move on to my next level. I just finished polishing this with 1,000 grit. Now when I go to 1,000, that's when I start using water. I don't wipe the rag on it, I just use water and I go back and forth. Make sure you take this pad and you go up and down all around. you have to make sure to cover it on each and every coat, sand that you do. You want to make sure you get everything. Okay, you're starting to see a shine here. Once I go to 2,000, you'll really see it come out, and then 3,000, it's going to look just like the top. Well, the edge is completed. I used the 3,000 and it's just like glass. I have one more step I want to show you. Granite is a natural stone and it's porous. So when you cut the ends and you break the seal that came from the factory, you need to reseal it. So that's why I take a good sealer and I rub it on all the ends, everywhere where I made cuts. And it's a good thing to use this sealer every 6 months. Some people do it every year. If it starts to look deglossed, wipe a sealer on it. It's very easy to do. It just takes minutes. You can get it at any home improvement store. That's all for today. Check out my next video and we're going to cover cutting an undermount sink and polishing that up. I'll see you later.